Hi, I'm Pastor Bill with your Maple Minute for this Thursday, October the 29th, 2020. As we close out October in 2020, we're also closing out our series on living that intentional life, living the way God had designed us to do. We gave you 7 life principles that we've covered at length. They went from things like serve God, not sin, to fear God, not men, love God, not the world, believe God, not the deceiver, obey God, not your feelings, worship God, not comfort, and serve God, not self. Those were the 7 ideas, and we went through and gave you at length some practical ideas on how to do that and the reasonability for it. But really, why should we do what we're saying to do? And that's how I want to finish this series out. Why should we live this intentional life? Why should I serve God? Why should I worship God? And that makes it sort of easy in living this intentional life. I would say just a couple things, and hopefully you'll get these because they're very impactful. To seek God is the greatest quest. That's why we should do it. There's nothing else you could search for in life that's as good as God. To fear God is the greatest respect. People are always looking for respect. In fact, there was a famous old song that spelled out R-E-S-P-E-C-T, find out what that means to me. But the truth of the matter is, as much as you might respect someone else or desire their respect, the greatest respect is the fear of God. Number 3 is to love God is the greatest affection. Certainly, we all look forward to times when we can get romantically involved with others. There's those times of Valentine's where you feel good, and there is those relationships. But the greatest affection on this planet is the love of God. To obey God is the greatest act, and it really is. There's nothing greater in your life that you could ever do. Parenting, as good as it is, doesn't measure up to obeying God. I'm telling you, there's nothing you can do that's greater than obeying God. To believe God is the greatest adventure, and that's something we've been talking a little bit about on our Sunday night Bible study that we just got back to. God invites us into the adventure of life, and I think so often we live this mundane, boring life because we don't believe really God is who He says He is, and He'll do what He says He'll do. So to believe God is the greatest adventure we could ever live. To worship God is the greatest experience. Certainly people are all over the planet looking for great experiences. Saw a woman who was over 100 the other day jump out of an airplane to celebrate her birthday. And what she's just looking is for a great experience. But let me just tell you this. If you want the greatest experience of life, that comes from worshiping God. It doesn't come from all kinds of adventures and things like that on our own. It comes from the worship of God. And then to serve God is the greatest privilege. To be able to say that I work for God, there's nothing greater. No matter what company you work, some of you may work for yourselves, and you may feel pretty honored that you have your own business. But I want you to know there's nothing greater than serving God, because that is the greatest privilege. In Philippians, the Apostle Paul tells us he's trying to help the believers there in Philippi get through some of their issues. And so he encourages us to have the mindset of Christ. And I think as we finish this out, what I'd like for us to see is what Paul said about Jesus Christ in Philippians chapter 2, verses 9 through 11. This familiar passage, Paul speaking, he says, therefore, God exalted him, because he had humbled himself. Therefore, God exalted him, that is Jesus, to the highest place, and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. You know, that's really why we live the life we do, because He's worthy. He's worthy. I came across a sermon that had some good things in it, and I wanted to sort of share it with you because I thought it was so good. It's just a real quick statement that this man made in this sermon. He said this: there was a man who was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant woman. He grew up in another village. He worked in a carpenter's shop until he was 30. Then for 3 years he was an itinerant preacher. He never owned a home. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never had a family. He never went to college. He never put his foot inside a big city. He never traveled 200 miles from the place where he was born. He never did one of the things that usually accompany greatness. He had no credentials but himself. While still a young man, the tide of popular opinion turned against him. His friends ran away. One of them denied him. He was turned over to his enemies. He went through the mockery of a trial. He was nailed upon a cross between 2 thieves. While he was dying, his executioners gambled for the one piece of property that he had on earth, his own clothes. When he was dead, he was laid in a borrowed grave through the pity of a friend. 20 long centuries have come and gone, and today he is the centerpiece of the human race and leader of the column of progress. I am far within the mark when I say that all the armies that have ever marched, all the navies that were ever built, and all the parliaments that have sat and the kings who have ever reigned put together have not affected the life of man upon this earth as powerfully as has that one solitary life. You know, Jesus' life reminds us that we are called to greatness. We are called to live a life that is intentional. So, as we finish out, let me just challenge you with this. Won't you choose to live a life that matters? Let's have a life that actually is worth living. So much of our time on this earth is wasted time. You know, it's cool to get involved in activities, and there's nothing wrong with doing things, but sometimes we get so involved on who the greatest basketball player in the world is, and you know what? It doesn't matter, because it's the greatest God who designed mankind that really does matter. That's the whole idea, because one day we will stand before Jesus, and every knee will bow. You can either bow now and live the life that God intended, or you can wait and have to be forced to bow. And that's not a good thing. So I would encourage you, choose a life that matters.